man, white, heterosexual. How are privileges protected? Often invisibly.
Symmetry and inversion. It's the same strategy for defending the privileges of white men, heterosexuals, and others, but to varying degrees. Symmetry refers to the symmetry of suffering, meaning that if women suffer as women, as members of the group of women in society, because discrimination, violence, etc. are imposed on them, in fact, men suffer too, and men suffer too, or even men suffer just as much. And since women and men suffer equally, let's talk about something else. This is something we also hear about racism. We hear, yes, there is racism in society, it's hard to deny, but there is also anti-white racism. This is something you hear a lot on the far right. It's as if the two forms of racism cancel each other out, justify one another, and so there's a kind of symmetry. There's nothing left to discuss, there's no more problem, there's no more racism. The question is, do we suffer as men, as a dominant group? Do we suffer as heterosexuals? The answer is clearly no. Who even thinks about this question? Do we suffer as able-bodied people? Do we suffer because we are able-bodied? No, obviously this question doesn't even cross our minds. There are quite a few men who have a lot of arguments on this subject. The one that comes up most often is the issue of suicides. Men's suicide is the idea that men commit suicide more than women, which would supposedly be proof of male suffering. That's true, and it's not true. It's true to say that in many Western countries, men die by suicide more often, proportionally, but it's also measured in those same countries that in most cases, women attempt suicide much more than men. The difference is that for cultural reasons, the methods of suicide are not the same, and men more often use firearms. So obviously the statistical result, in the end, it's different. In certain countries, in Quebec, for example, it has also been measured that among men who die by suicide, there is an overrepresentation of young homosexual men, which means that they are not committing suicide as men, suffering as men. They are obviously committing suicide because they are homosexual, and in this society, they face pressure, discrimination, and violence, sometimes even within their own families, which leads at certain times, some of them to extremes, such as suicide. And so we can clearly see that this is a strategy that works extremely well. But when you push it a bit further, from symmetry, you move to inversion. This consists of saying that two groups suffer equally, men and women suffer equally, but then it even gets reversed. And so we, for example, we white heterosexual men become the victims. Victims of what? Victims, for example, of the fact that since there is a demand for equality, which is completely legitimate, we no longer know where we fit in. We can't say anything anymore. There are people who write that there are new inquisitors, a censorship of thought, a dictatorship of political correctness. All this just because after millennia, we are being asked to acknowledge the existence of our privileges in order to abolish them, obviously. So this strategy of reversal can also be seen in individual cases, in individual strategies, but ones that are repeated. And so here too, it forms a system. This is the concept of DARVO, which was highlighted by the American researcher Jennifer Freed. DARVO, that's D-A-R-V-O in English. So it means deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. So the victim becomes the aggressor, and the aggressor becomes the victim. And so from being a sexual aggressor, he shifts to the status of a victim of a malicious woman who is a liar and falsely accuses him. We've seen this happen a lot in cinema in France when victims have been accused of trying to revive their careers, actresses, for example, by making up sexual assaults that never happened. It's an incredible form of violence, but it can be very effective. Now, regarding racialized people, this also happens when someone makes a joke or uses racist expressions that exist in the public sphere. As a white person, it can be hard to understand that this little thing, which seems like a minor detail to us, isn't worth making a fuss about. Whereas it's actually a reference to violence, to the violence that a black person experiences all day long. And it's extremely hurtful, it's extremely painful. So instead of siding with the victim, we say they're exaggerating. That she's not funny, that she's making a fuss, that she has no sense of humor until she finally goes silent. And so here we are, reaffirming our historical white supremacy without even realizing it. And the next step is that we won't even have to react anymore, because the victim knows that she has little chance of being heard. In fact, she's very likely to be blamed by the system of inversion, and so she won't say anything. And that's why I think that as white men, we need to be very, very, very attentive to this fourth strategy of symmetry and inversion.